Recently, Proxmox Virtual Environment version 8.1 and Proxmox Backup Server version 3.1 have come out. So today I want to go over a quick video of what's in these new releases and how to upgrade to them. So let's first take a look at the wiki page first. This wiki page goes over all of the major feature changes for it, and there's a separate one for the Proxmox Backup Server and the Proxmox Virtualization. Many of the new features and bug fixes that come to these new releases of Proxmox come from the software under the hood that Proxmox uses being updated. Proxmox relies on a lot of open source software for many of their functionalities, and a lot of those versions have been updated. The exact versions are showed on the screen right now, and none of these are huge releases as well, but a lot of these do bring newer features and bug fixes. So Debian Bookworm is a slightly newer version of Debian Stable, which should be very similar features-wise, but just a few more bug fixes and security improvements. Kernel 6.5 brings a few more newer features and better new hardware support. And most notably, ZFS 2.2 has come in. The biggest improvement ZFS 2.2 has is it fixes the data corruption bugs that were in previous versions of ZFS that have been found out recently. These were thought to be part of the new features that ZFS 2.2 had, but it turns out they were actually in there for a little bit longer. These are relatively rare occurring issues, but it is something you want to keep your eye out for and update your system so these don't have any possibility of happening. Let's actually take a look at some of the other features that ZFS 2.2 brings, because it's actually kind of an interesting release. Some of these other features include block cloning. So typically when you copy a file, it has to copy all of the blocks. But because ZFS is copy on write, it's able to essentially just link that new copy to the old file, and as you modify both the files, it'll store the changes separately. If you're used to using something like hard links, this is very similar, but it's set at a file system level instead of being managed by a user with hard links. Programs like Copy and Linux will try to use this automatically, but it does have to be in the same data set. You can also use cp-reflink, and what that'll do is it'll force it to use it if it isn't being used already. ZFS 2.2 also supports newer checksum algorithms, which should be secure and also faster on newer hardware. You can take a look at the rest of the releases with the ZFS release here on the GitHub page for OpenZFS. One other cool feature it has is it has ZSTD early abort. So if you're using ZSTD compression, which is typically one of the best lossless compression algorithms currently out there, it'll automatically stop compressing a block if it's not able to compress it. Other compression algorithms that ZFS use are capable of doing this, but now that is coming to ZFS, so that means if you're using uncompressible data, so something like video that is already pre-compressed is typically going to be uncompressible with something like ZSTD. It won't try to compress it if it won't make any difference in terms of file space savings. Scrolling down, one of the big feature releases to Proxmox Virtualization Engine and Proxmox Backup Server is Secure Boot is now working out of the box. And this means that Proxmox, the company, has gotten keys and worked with Microsoft so that it will work with Secure Boot on almost all motherboards straight out of the box. Secure Boot is a reasonable security improvement and mainly designed to work against something like an evil maid attack. It'll prevent people from going and changing files like EFI or the kernel files on your system, which are going to be signed using Secure Boot, and causing potential security issues by having those files modified. It isn't the biggest security improvement in a lot of environments, especially where you have other forms of physical protection on the system, but the biggest improvement I see is that many newer systems are designed around running Windows with Secure Boot enabled and can make it difficult to turn off Secure Boot. Another feature that's coming to Proxmox Virtualization Engine is software-defined networking has exited the phase of tech preview. Software-defined networking in Proxmox is a decent improvement over the previous system, where you'd have to go and edit the different Proxmox settings for each of the different nodes and have to set up VLANs between them. It's a good amount more smooth, and I plan on doing a full video on this. Another improvement that Proxmox Virtualization Engine has is a newer notification system. In addition to the standard just send it out on port 25 to whatever email server you want, it's now capable of using SMTP email and also Gotify. I, as a demo, set up Gotify right here on one of my systems to demonstrate how this works. Gotify has something like an Android app, and it can also send you notifications via its web browser, and is a nice way of managing notifications that isn't emails if you don't want to work that way. So in this demo right here, I have it seeing all of my different notifications I have going to this system, and it sends it to a little nice page here. In this case, I've set it to see all the notifications. So I can see that it actually completed a successful backup in this example, and I see all the different little Proxmox notifications that are going to appear at the bottom of the screen in Proxmox. Let's take a look at the controls of how that can be managed now. So under Data Center, scrolling down to Notifications, I can see now I can go add a Gotify, send mail, or SMTP. SMTP is also I think new to this release, and allows you to use something like your Gmail account to forward that email forward. One issue with using the previous system where it just sent out an email on port 25 is that a lot of home ISPs especially don't allow just sending out port 25 by default, and you may have to contact your ISP to change those settings. And also a lot of major email providers, something like Gmail's or the Microsoft email providers, don't trust emails coming from random providers that aren't signed at all. So having it go through something like a Gmail account or another major email provider is likely going to make it so it doesn't immediately end up in your spam folder. Both of these are a nice improvement, and also you can use these notification matchers to go edit which emails you want and which notifications you want to get. So I can make it say, for this example, everything, or I could edit it to only show errors and unknown ones. Unfortunately, these changes to the notification system haven't found their way to Proxmox Backup Server, and it still uses the classic approach of just sending out an email request on port 25 and hoping it gets to your system. Thinking about Proxmox Backup Server, let's take a look at some of the features that are unique to Proxmox Backup Server 3.1. It has a lot of the changes we talked about earlier with newer software under the hood, but some of the other features it brings includes local sync job support. So now in Proxmox Backup Server, you can sync between one data store on a host and another data store on a host. This could be useful for something like having a copy on 2 local disks in a system, but it can also be nice for migrating it from one disk array to a new disk array if you wanted to do something like that as well. Some of the other features it brings includes better tape backup system with newer LTO9 tapes, and they also say countless improvements to general client and backend notice usability. I haven't noticed anything personally playing around with this system, but it generally seems to work fine during my upgrade. Going back to Proxmox Virtualization Environment version 8.1, some of the other changes include having a new unique OUI for Proxmox VMs starting now with the new version. This one starts with BC2411, and this means that all the MAC addresses created by default in Proxmox will start with those 6 letters here. And this can often make it a lot easier if you're looking on something like a router where you see IP addresses of those systems and see, oh, that one's a Proxmox one versus something generic, for example. But I will note that's only for new VMs being created. If you're updating an existing system, it'll keep the MAC address that it created when that system was being made. Some of the other small improvements that it brings includes giving an option to bulk suspend all of the guests on a system at the same time. So if you go under your system here, you can go bulk actions and then you can say bulk suspend. And that will essentially just pause all of the guests. It'll keep all of their information in memory, but it'll just stop them execute. And then you can resume the VMs later on with bulk start if you'd like to. One thing I would like to see is bulk hibernate. So where it will pause the VMs and then copy the memory state to disk. There's an option on all the VMs here where you can right click and say hibernate VMs, and I'd like that to be able to do it for all of them at the same time, as I find that as an easy way to bulk hibernate all the VMs, do something to the physical host, and then it can start them all back up again. Another interesting feature that PVE 8.1 brings is a little checkbox here when you're setting up a new VM to add an additional drive of VirtIO drivers. If this is checked, you'll get an option to add a second ISO file for the VM, or you can put your VirtIO drivers in here. This makes it a little bit less steps for doing this after this wizard is completed. In addition to the features that I mentioned today, there's a lot of other features that I'm scrolling through right now. It's actually pretty impressive how many features they brought to this relatively small .1 release, and it's kind of nice seeing all of these. Looking through all of these, there's a lot of this little, this is nice in some circumstances features, so it's really great to see that they're fixing little problems and improving some things. Just to point out one other cool feature is they've also improved the installation ISO, and one of the things they've improved is now when you have like multiple network cards, it'll highlight in green which ones are currently linked active and which ones are in gray, means they're currently unplugged. So if your system has a lot of network cards, it's easy to find out which one you actually want to be plugged in and selected by default. None of these are huge fundamental changes to Proxmox, what it does and how you can use it, but it is really nice seeing that they're bringing a lot of little improvements that make it just a better and nicer to use operating system. Now that I've gone over many of the exciting new features, let's talk about updating your existing system to the new version. If you're running a new version of Proxmox, so version 8 or newer, it's a relatively seamless update process, using primarily the apt-update and apt-upgrade commands. If you want to do this process in the GUI, you can go on your system, click on refresh, which is the same as doing an apt-update on the system, and then you can do upgrade, which is the same as doing apt-upgrade. If you're running versions before version 8, so version 7.4 or earlier, I'd highly suggest looking at the wiki pages, as you need to edit some of the config files to tell it which versions to go and grab from the network. And you also want to make some more checks, because there's a good amount more changes under the hood that you just want to make sure that nothing's going to break. For best practice, I'd highly recommend that you shut down or hibernate all of your VMs and containers, do these updates, reboot the system, and then turn it back on. Though I have had luck doing it when it is running, and an update is still needed to update the kernel to the latest version and update some kernel modules like ZFS to the latest features. Updating Proxmox Backup Server is very similar, where you need to do the apt update and apt upgrade either in the command line or you can do it on the GUI on the system, going under administration on the system, going under updates, and then go refresh and then upgrade, and that'll update all the packages on the system to the latest version, and then rebooting the system to apply the new kernel and kernel modules on the system so that everything is running correctly. I've updated a few systems already to version 8.1 without any real issues. But issues can come up when there's any types of problems, so I'd highly recommend taking a look at some of the known issues on this new version just to see if anything you're using will line up with those new versions. It would also be best practice to back up all your VMs and containers before performing the upgrade, just in case something really bad happens and you have to restore from those backups, and also scheduling yourself a bit of time in case the worst case scenario happens. I find that this is very unlikely to happen, but just plan for the worst, and likely it's going to be just a super simple upgrade, reboot, and you're good to go. Thanks for watching this video on the latest version of Proxmox Virtual Environment and Proxmox Backup Server, and let me know what your thoughts on these changes are. Thanks for watching.